Thank you, John. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm delighted, and it's an honor to represent PwC in this event in Data Amplify. I'm very happy to see so many people coming from outside and to visit Madrid and Spain. As already said, my name is Tamer Dawood. I'm the leading partner for digital transformation XBRL in PwC Spain, and I'm also the Chief Digital Officer of our assurance division here at PwC. I worked a lot of years in XBRL and with XBRL, and hopefully we will do so in years to come. I just wanted to say also in the following days that we will be seeing a lot of digital reporting and the relevance about digital deforming and how it's transforming. And I strongly believe how it's going to transform even more future reporting processes. I see that clearly happening. I see that happening on the financial reporting side, which is clearly, and I think everybody knows it. I'm located in Europe, so we see also a lot of pickup from a sustainability perspective. We will talk about that as well. So I think there's a lot of things to come. This technology is an enabler for transparency, accuracy, as you said, to make information more accessible, understandable to all stakeholders. I think all the things that you already know, and I think we all subscribe to it. But even more, I think it's a compliance tool that helps us with the regulations, but it's not only for regulation. Now, if you think about in the last years, we are here in Europe, we were concentrated on SF reporting, which is the European Single Electronic Format. I'm sure everybody's familiar with it, but it's something that is evolving and it's continuing. And we are all waiting without patience for the CSRD XBRL taking, which will hopefully, if regulators deem so appropriate, do so next year, and it will come into force next year. Well, that's the estimation. So that will be another wave that we have to tackle from different angles. All of you that are present here, from the regulators, from the service providers, consulting providers, etc., as a big ecosystem. So I think looking into the future, and if you think about not only what is coming from CSRD tagging, I'm sure you already heard as well, the European Single Access Point initiative from the European Union that was just recently approved, which is coming, as far as I recall, into force in operation in 2027, which will require that all companies in general will register digitally their accounts, which will also be a uplift, I think, for all of us that are dedicated to this specific activity related around digital reporting. I think that's something that is another milestone that we all have to prepare jointly and get there and help in our case, help our clients to do so. Maybe also a side note that we started doing XBRL work 4 years ago. Somebody was asking me just before that, because in Spain we started with the voluntary reporting period. We were one of the first countries in doing that for SF, at least. Obviously, there are other areas of this part of the world that were more advanced, and we have done, in all the territories in the European Union, a lot of consulting projects, a lot of projects with our vendor supporters and vendor partners, technology partners, to help our clients, and hopefully we will do so in the years to come, and more years, John, and I hope the regulation will accompany us. So, moving on, I think you already mentioned that the combination between XBRL and artificial intelligence, and that's what Joe will be talking in a few minutes. I think this is a clear connection between these two things. Artificial intelligence needs structured data, needs good data. If it's structured on a data and metadata level, even better for the artificial intelligence and more precise. Therefore, I think if we engage in improving the raw material for the AI, the better it is for all of us. No? So that's something that's definitely is going to a trending topic in these days to come, and hopefully Joe will introduce that. And as I mentioned, Joe, just a few words about Joe. He's a prominent leader in the field of artificial intelligence and technology. He's a key member of our PwC's Global Chief Commercial Leadership Team. He's our Global Chief AI Officer. I'm sure more of you see always more and more the new role which is coming in the companies, the Chief AI Officer. So I think, Joe, it's our one on the global level. He's the one who was defining and executing our PwC AI strategy on a global level. So he was the person to talk to. He was also the Chief Product and Technology Officer. He was member of our US leadership team. So he has a splendid career. He has a lot of knowledge. He knows his way around when we talk about AI and reporting perspectives. So I think that will be really enriching for us. And if he's connected, he will be connecting live from the US. He couldn't make it in person, unfortunately. But hopefully he will be giving us some interesting minutes in the following to come. Afterwards, we will have a QA where you can ask questions and please participate, or that's the idea. And if Joe is connected, hopefully it's the case. With further ado, I pass the floor to Joe Atkinson. Joe?
Sorry I couldn't be with you all, but it is a pleasure to be with you today as you come together for Data Amplified. So I'm very, very honored to contribute to this discussion virtually. I am, as those that know me, a bit of an amateur historian. So I hope you'll forgive me if I start this discussion with a bit of history. Some of it will be mine. You heard some of it from Tamir. Some of it will be yours in the XBRL community, and much of it will be the history that we share. I joined PwC way back when it was Coopers and Lybrand for me back in '93. And in preparation for this talk, I did some digging through some old files, because I suspect, as is true for many of you, data and technology and the opportunity it creates for people and organizations always been a passion of mine. So it was 2002, a time that I assure you does not feel that long for me, that some of you may remember that Microsoft was the first company to report their financial data using the XBRL reporting framework. In fact, they announced that very important milestone in Berlin at the XBRL Steering Committee and the reporting conference that was held that year. John Connor, who was the CFO of Microsoft at the time, said that through internet delivery, XBRL will also provide analysts and investors with extensible financial data to make informed decisions about the company. He said he saw it not only as the future of standard for publishing, delivery, and use of financial information, but also, in his words, a logical business choice. Tucked into my old archives and files actually were those XBRL files that were originally published way back when, and it was clear that we were experimenting with that framework as a firm to do what I think is the most important thing we all do, which is to learn, to experiment, and then learn some more, then hopefully innovate and learn some more. And that was 22 years ago. That learning and innovation continues. I share this not because the fundamental objectives that took us into that experiment 22 years ago remain today. We hadn't uncovered or solved all of the challenges of structured financial reporting, but perhaps more importantly, we recognize them. We saw both the challenge of unstructured, untaggable, unknowable data, and we saw the power of putting a construct around it that would give us a greater opportunity to ingest, analyze, and compare that data. And I'm certain that way back when, those 20 plus years ago, we had no idea how far we would come in those 20 years, nor would we really see how far we have left to go. The simple, powerful truth is that structured data has greater value than unstructured data, and that's been core of our thinking for decades. And it felt like a simple, unchallenged truth right up until the age of AI came upon us. But as they say, spoiler alert, we'll come to this in a few minutes, properly structured and tagged data is as important today as it ever was. But let me go back to a bit more history because I think it will help set the stage. If there's a date that marks the advent of the age of the internet, it's largely agreed that that is 1983. What happened in 1983 is the internet as we know it, the connections of computers and servers and data and users, had actually been around since 1969. And I won't ask any of you in the Q&A to tell me if you were around in 1969. I will share that I was not, but it was really, really close. In 1969, ARPANET was the name that was given to the early internet. It was a network of computers that had been connected across governments and research institutions and universities. And it provided the very simple ability to share information, files, and data in a way that just had not been possible to get to prior to that. But ARPANET was only that, it was a foundation. It wasn't until 1983 that we saw the emergence of the first protocols and standards, all of which will still very familiar to this audience. That was the emergence of TCP/IP, IP as an IP address that we all talk about, but more formally known as the Transmission Control Protocol / Internet Protocol. It did something very simple but very powerful. It standardized the way we connected with each other in this digital world. In 1990, it was then that we translated what lies underneath that digital complexity into the World Wide Web. And it was just a few years later in 93 that along came the browsers, products like Mosaic and Netscape. They opened up the internet in ways that had not been possible in 1983, certainly was not even thinkable in 1969. They translated what was the underlying data and information on the internet and presented it in a way that we could consume it in more powerful applications. Powerful applications that allowed us to rethink what it meant to be connected to each other, really what it meant to know anything at all. But think about what this actually means in the current days and the current pathways that we're all on. What it really means is that in that moment, we made accessible untold volumes of data and human knowledge that was now accessible to anyone with a laptop and an internet connection, which admittedly in 1983 was not that easy to provide. But as time and progress marched on, more people had the reliable internet connectivity and a reliable device on which to access it, often now in our pockets. It's perhaps the most remarkable intersection of human knowledge and technology since the Gutenberg press in 1440. But friends, as we meet together today, we find ourselves in our own moment similar to that evolutionary milestone in 1993. So now let's leap forward just shy of 30 years to late 2022. In November, November of that year, the world was introduced to ChatGPT 3.5. Now, it wasn't the first time people had talked about transformers. Some of that actually goes back to the 90s. And it wasn't the first time that the opportunity was becoming clear. But it was the first time that the technology captured the world's attention. More than 1 million consumers signed on to that platform in just 5 days. For those of you that know Netflix, it took them 3 years and 5 months to achieve the same milestone. It's just a few months later that ChatGPT had grown to 100 million users. It was the fastest user growth of any application that we've seen in known history. And again, it was a moment where the vast data of the internet, unlocked not too long ago by those worldwide browsers, was now being served up through the power of neural networks and powerful tools of natural language processing, not just ChatGPT, but we saw the emergence of Claude and Gemini, Perplexity, and more. And that list will go on and on. While the progress to date has been stunning, we remain in the very early days of this next revolution in technology. And I believe our challenge as leaders and regulators and policymakers is how do we help organizations and communities and individuals navigate these remarkable days? Firm from which I proudly come to you is itself 175 years old. We've been in the business of providing perspective and advice for now approaching 2 centuries, and I haven't been around for all of that. I believe there's a simple reason why this remarkable firm has endured for so long, and it's because we're constructed in a way that allows us to be open to possibilities. The possibilities of new tech, of new innovations, of new businesses, new ideas and approaches, new methodologies, new taxonomies. It's the same power of possibility that took us from ledger books to green bar paper to 10 keys to ERP and now to AI, all in a 175-year blink of an eye. But now that we make this leap to today, we have the power to recognize from all that history and all that learning and all that innovation that today of all days, no one can or should claim to have all the answers. While my own history with XBRL goes back to the early 2000s, and I've confessed my love of history, we have to acknowledge that while we don't have all the answers, it is important now to look ahead. What will be the role of data standards organizations in a world of remarkable and relentless advances in AI? We're going to bring us back to one of the comments I made when we started. It would be easy to imagine that in this world of advancing AI, we can all comfortably sit back and we can just wait for the AI agents to solve the complexity of financial reporting or to help us sort out the challenges of comparing similar but not identical data sets. But the reality is much more complex. Amara's law, and forgive me, this might be more history. Roy Amara was a researcher, a technologist, a Stanford computer scientist, and while we're all much more familiar with Moore's law, which helped us understand that microchip capacity would double in roughly every 2 years, Amara gave us a markedly different construct for understanding the advancing technology around us. Yes, it's undoubtedly moving fast, but in Amara's view, he said, we tend to overestimate the effect of a technology in the short run and underestimate the effect in the long run. We are, in my humble opinion, doing exactly that right now in the world of AI. We see the power of ChatGPT in November of 2022, and we're simply blown away. Some of you may remember the other famous quote from Arthur Clarke, the fiction writer, who said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Yes, when I engaged with that natural language processing way back in 2022, I think I'd have a hard time clarifying the distinction from magic. But I think it's incredibly important that we all understand that not only did this magic not appear overnight, the importance of the things that we've been working on for decades, structure, governance, data sets, data that can be relied upon, data that can be evaluated in consistent ways, is perhaps now more important than ever before, given the onslaught of technology and the unlocking of so much more data. It was 1952, and the first computer was programmed to play checkers, and it was programmed to, quote, learn the game independently. It was 55 that we see the first reference to artificial intelligence. John McCarthy at Dartmouth wanted to bring people together to provide greater clarity and a more consistent definition to the world of thinking machines. And in his effort to do that, maybe with a bit of marketing insight on the table, he turned thinking machines discussions into artificial intelligence. So other than my very now widely confessed role as amateur historian, why do I share all this? Well, for one, I do think, and I hope you find it interesting. Two, I think for all of us that are navigating this moment, there's something comforting in knowing that these breakneck speed of invention and innovation that can often feel like they emerged overnight, they've taken some significant time to develop. Satya Nadella of Microsoft has said that AI's computational capacity is doubling every 6 months. And the reality is that that speed is one thing, but taking advantage of and applying that remarkable capacity, it's going to take the things that this organization, the people we all serve, know well. Things like systems and processes, perhaps most importantly, people, will take those systems, processes, and people time to digest, to integrate, and to adopt. There's no switch here to throw. Even if the magic did appear overnight, applying it consistently across the complex reporting ecosystem in which we all operate is another matter entirely. We do know in this world of advancing technologies that data matters. In fact, in my role, I've had the great privilege of talking with C-suites and boards and technology leaders all across the world. And they ask a few questions, very specific questions, including whether the hype is real. But once we get past that moment and I assure them that yes, the hype is real, we get to the next question that they almost always ask. What do I need to do to take advantage of this moment? The answer is as simple as it is difficult to achieve. I tell our clients and our own organization that there are a few critical things to think about. Building the foundation of responsible AI, something that resonates so strongly with the mission of XBRL. Secure, transparent, and governed processes and technologies that are measured against a defined set of standards to ensure the AI we're all deploying is serving the interests not only of your enterprise, but of your customers and stakeholders, employees, and the communities in which we operate. It may seem like a simple step, but we know the challenges associated with things like data security, model drift, reliability, and transparency are real. And if only they were the only issues. It's estimated that 500 milliliters of water is consumed for every 5 to 50 prompts in a generative AI tool. Energy consumption is a similarly challenging aspect in the growth of AI. So sustainable and thoughtful execution of this technology is far from simple. But as always, people provide a pathway. We need to tap into and cultivate the cultures of innovation and experimentation with our people, giving them controlled and secure access to tools that allow them to learn in a safe environment, that same experimentation from 20 years ago. That is the pathway to discovering and unlocking the power of these technologies and how they apply to the work we all do every day. That means tools plus tech, equipping people with the knowledge they need to use these powerful capabilities in a safe and impactful way. And then there's the technology architectures underneath. The architecture requires flexibility and scalable infrastructure. Anyone in this space knows, as we've talked about this morning, this afternoon, that the world is changing fast. But the technology architecture to unlock the potential of AI also requires us to be flexible to account for that changing world. We need multi-model infrastructure that accounts for the reality that models have different strengths and address different use cases with different degrees of effectiveness and precision. The best organizations will embed the infrastructure to make the right model available to the right people with the right training at the right time and targeted to the right problem. At PwC, we deployed Chat PwC. It's what we affectionately call our AI chassis. It's now accessible to more than 200,000 people around our network and will ultimately expand its use to every single one of our people. It provides today access to 6 different models in a safe, secure, and well-governed environment. And it gives our people access to these models that, when packaged with their training in our policy framework, unlocks both new efficiencies and new innovations in service delivery to our clients. That training and policy framework could not be more important to us, and it couldn't be more important to the moment. They represent critical pillars of our approach. We made the decision early on that understanding AI wasn't a requirement for just some of our people. It was a requirement for all of our people. Understanding both the opportunity and the risks of AI wasn't just a requirement for our deep technology specialists, it was a requirement for every single person at PwC. And our obligation isn't just to help some people navigate through this moment of AI. It was, as best we can as an organization, to equip every single one of our 375,000 people across 149 territories with the knowledge and the skills they need to responsibly and thoughtfully apply these emerging technologies to the way they work every day. We're doing this both because we believe this is the direction of professional services overall, but equally important, we believe there's an obligation that employers have to equip their workforce for this AI-driven future, wherever that future may take them. And what does this all mean to the future of the topic today? Well, I confess that perhaps in retirement, I may move out of the role of amateur historian into the role of amateur futurist because it's very hard to hold a futurist accountable because by that time we've all moved on to the next speaking engagement. But all kidding aside, predicting the future more than 3 to 5 years out, and given this pace of technology, it may be a fool's errand. But having said that, there are some things I'm very confident will remain and are true. I have no doubt that AI tools will unlock new methods and are already unlocking new methods for taking large swaths of unstructured data and turning it into much more structured data sets. But as Amara informed us, that will take some time. But in my very humble view, AI's applicability to unstructured data is a slightly different opportunity than the topic that brings us together today. Because the data we're talking about is not only structured, but in large measure due to the efforts of this organization, it's arguably the most structured and well understood data anywhere in the enterprise. Reporting that is not only important to the enterprise itself, but the consistency of which is important to the function of our markets around the world. This important challenge is in the DNA of who we are at PwC, and I would offer the DNA of who we all are in the XBRL community. Structured data, including tags and metadata, will continue to be a critical building block. Building blocks that help us achieve consistency and reliability of financial data, which in turn is critical to providing investors and stakeholders the information they need to make those well-informed decisions. And as a CPA myself, I believe firmly that providing assurance over those building blocks will continue to be critical to the confidence that we all need in the capital markets, supporting not only investors, but the regulators that oversee this market. These are complex days, and some would say these are complex topics. The intersection of data and AI is creating even greater complexity around topics like transparency, reliability of models, the myriad of complexities presented by data sovereignty across the globe. We know new regulations are emerging every day. The EU AI Act is the most prominent. The US President's executive order in November of 2023 are two great examples, but there are dozens more at the country and the state level. Across the world, governments are stepping in to regulate AI in all different manners, creating a fabric of intersecting regulatory obligations and responsibilities. But even as the regulatory environment evolves, so does the technology and the promise it delivers. And make no mistakes, the promise is real. These tools unlock new methods for the pursuit of insights, from the notes to financial statements and management disclosures and analyses, or even just the analyst conference calls. They provide new tools not only for investors, but for preparers of the financial statements as well, who are now armed with an even greater ability to evaluate data across their organization, summarize and review the financial information for which they're accountable. That gives them the ability to make sense out of some of the remaining unstructured data, the conversations, the analysis, and the content that creates new possibilities for insights from financial statements, and in turn makes the structured and tagged data in the financials even more powerful and relevant. The world's been changing since the first time we started tagging financial data back in '98, and certainly many more important innovation milestones in the years leading up to that. And it's certainly changed even more since the Mosaic browser in '93 and ARPANET in 1969. But just as the technology world rests for no one, nor does the financial reporting world. We have new issues and new opportunities to address, some of which are on your agenda these next few days, including sustainability reporting, which is drawing on new data sets that have not benefited from the same decades-long financial reporting construct to which our financials have been subject for so many years. And arguably, this data is important not only to investors and regulators, but to every resident of our shared habitat as we work together to create more sustainable organizations and address the challenges of our age. As these advances continue, this organization has relentlessly driven an agenda to provide for the comparability and insights that are made possible by a greater understanding of financial statement data. And I would argue maybe better than any other data set available at the enterprise. The value of that consistency and structure cannot be overstated. And while I have no doubt innovations will continue to reveal new ways to make more use of more data, including the rapidly emerging agentic frameworks in AI, I am equally confident that the standardization and tagging of financial data positions us to take even greater advantage of these tools in the short term, maybe even accelerating a bit past tomorrow's balanced skepticism and driving adoption in ways that the new technology alone could not make possible. I hope these comments are helpful. Hope the perspective on history is interesting. I thank you for your time this afternoon as you kick off your conference, and I'm happy to turn it back to the room and answer any questions I can.
Joe, thank you very much. Are there some questions for Joe? We have some roving mics in the room. I'm going to start off while people are getting nervous. Oh, gee, asking the first question. I'm going to start off, Joe. Could you tell us a little bit about what you think people should be considering in terms of their own workforce? How does AI impact workforce? It's really interesting to hear the fact that you have taken presumably a very expensive decision to train your entire workforce. But what are the broader implications for workforces in different contexts?
Yeah, the workforce discussion, as you know, is a robust topic in its own right. I'll give a little perspective on why we made the decision we did, how we counsel clients, and then some of the challenges it creates downstream. The first, I come down to the basic fundamental relationship between employee and employer. And I believe, and this is individual Joe, but I believe that employers have a responsibility to help their employees build skills. If we're not helping people grow in their skills, then I think we have to question what it is that we're doing in terms of the interests of our employees. And obviously that's a handshake. The employee has to take advantage of those opportunities as well. But in an age where the technology is advancing as rapidly as this is, I think that obligation, that challenge becomes even more important. And that was why we made the decision, and to your point, it is not an inexpensive decision to bring this training to everybody. But it also reflects the fact that AI is becoming intrinsic in so many ways. It's showing up all through the fabric of the way organizations operate. And we believe that in the role that we play, it's incredibly important that our people have more than an awareness, but they have a fundamental understanding of how these tools and technologies operate. That includes making sure, for example, that we understand what to worry about with hallucinations, one of the most famous topics we all love to talk about in AI, and frankly, what not to worry about with hallucinations, where the data and the models are really rapidly addressing that challenge. It also means recognizing that the way people work is going to change. And we've seen this evolution. In fact, this organization's been at the heart of that evolution over the years with automation and some of the tools that we've seen over the years. But that evolution will mean that the way that most people work today is going to be different a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. And it's going to happen very rapidly. That's going to create potential capacity in organizations. It has implications for people's careers and growths and job security. And I believe that collectively as leaders, regulators, business owners, and leaders, we have an obligation to help build the bridge from the current to the future and get as many people across that bridge as want to get across the bridge with us. So I do think that this is an intersection of both the technology moment as well as the obligation that organizations have.
So just a quick follow-up on that. Accountancy is a very good example, but it's not the only example. We also see this within the ranks of regulators. We see this in the ranks of the legal profession. We see this in a number of other professional services fields. There is something of a hesitation amongst young people and graduates. Do I want to pursue that professional services career given that, well, maybe the AI will come and do a lot of the work? Is that a challenge, or is that just a challenge in the mind?
I think it is a real challenge across multiple professions, to your point. But if you take the accountancy pathway in the U.S. as an example, I know there's differences around the world. But that challenge actually gets stacked onto other challenges we've already had in the development of accountancies and the pipeline into the profession. So individuals coming into the profession right now are making choices about whether or not they want to get the CPA certification, for example. They're having discussions about whether they want to pursue accounting or would they rather pursue technology or computer sciences or data. And that's creating a constraint on the pipeline. So one of the opportunities here that I think is real and important is the power the technology will have to help us address a potential shortage in a critical capability that drives business every day. Now, because I'm an accountant by trade now, I would tell you I'd like to see more accountants, and if somebody asked me if they should be going into accounting, I say yes. But I do think that the way accountants work a year from now, 5 years from now, and beyond, I think it will be different. And I think different is okay because the way we work today is quite different than the way we worked when I walked into the doors of Coopers and Lybrand in 1993.
Thank you. Some other questions from the floor, please. I do not believe that this room is this quiet. Here's a question.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. So one of the issues we always hear with AI is, sharing confidential information, and it's a major hurdle for broader adoption. How do you see that? Is it direct implications for the IP that the company has shared, or is it, being absorbed into some other model and it impacts your IP, or is it really not that big of an issue?
Yeah, it's such a phenomenal and important question. So I would say it's an important issue, but I think it's much more solved and solvable than most of us realize. If you go back to when we first deploy, I'll just share the PwC story because as you can imagine, we enjoy this very privileged seat. We have access to some of the most important data in the world, and our clients expect us to protect it, and they should. So as we started to think about this idea that we needed to adopt tools at speed and scale, this is a question that we confronted early on. In the early deployments of some of the models, most people, I shared some of those stats about how many people were signing on to the consumer side. Most people were going out to the consumer models, and if you're out to the consumer models, called the public sources, in most instances, you're at risk for disclosing data that you shouldn't be disclosing. And so I always say to our people, the early days, I used to say, if you're going to do work in AI, work inside the firm technologies. If you're going to play with AI, you can play outside all you want, but no work data should flow. That's a policy constraint, but that doesn't actually solve the underlying problem. The way that the technology organizations are now solving it is they are moving into the enterprise game with their technology platforms. So Microsoft is an example. Our chat PwC is built on Azure. So we basically access the models that we're talking about through the Azure stack. That Azure stack is secured just as all the other operating technologies we use on the Microsoft Azure environment are secured. So our data that goes into chat PwC, for example, does not educate the models. The data actually doesn't even educate other users of chat PwC over time. We describe it as it educates the session. And I think that's a really important element. It's also why you see, for example, OpenAI launching OpenAI Enterprise, because organizations have been very clear with the technology providers, I'm really not going to give all my data, put it into a pool and let you teach your models and then hope that I'm going to get that benefit back. That's not how any of us, frankly, are thinking about it. And they know it, and they're working very, very aggressively to do it. I do think, though, coming back to the beginning of this, that the really difficult issue is the nuance of that story, to tell our people to play outside and work inside. That helps, but you have to control that. So, for example, we've shut down and controlled by technology access restrictions, access to a lot of those models. Our people don't love that because on one hand, we're telling them we want them to learn AI, but we want them to learn AI in those safe places where the data is protected and the data is controlled and it's not sourced into a way that IP is educating other people's models.
Thank you very much, Joe. I think we've got time for one more question. Is there one more question in the room?
So it's early here on the East Coast. I know you've started your afternoon, so I hope I haven't already put you to sleep as you have 2 days ahead of you.
I think we've We've very much enjoyed your presentation. Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much for joining us early in the morning.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. Have a great conference.
Please join with me in thanking Joe Atkinson.